Hey everybody, this is Mr. Bell with a quick intro on the feudal system of Europe. We're finally here! The European Middle Ages, complete with knights, kings, queens, crusades, trebuchets, castles, and dragons. Okay, maybe that last one was made up. Okay. So, we could give you guys a video or a PowerPoint explaining the feudal system, but that wouldn't be any fun for me, so I decided to make one myself. So this right here is Crusader Kings 2. It's a game by Paradox Interactive out of Sweden. It's a game about the life... It's a game about basically royal people, high-ranking people in the Middle Ages, and how you can become one of them. It is by no means required. You do not have to rush out and buy this game. You don't have to go home and tell your parents, well, Mr. Bell told me in order to make an A in world history, I need to buy this game. That is not what I'm saying at all. You do not have to buy this game. It is not required. Okay? So, quick backstory for the Middle Ages. The Roman Empire, or at least the western part of the Roman Empire, has fallen, and as such, Western Europe, for all intents and purposes, is in a state of chaos, right? There's no central, unifying, strong force that's holding all of these different peoples together, which is how feudalism, the topic of this, begins in the first place. It always begins with the collapse of a strong, unifying central government. We saw that in China, with the collapse of the Shang dynasty, right, going into the Zhou dynasty. We'll see it in Japan with the collapse of some of the empires, into like with the collapse of Heian Japan, moving into other types of stuff. That's mainly for if you're an AP student. But it always typically follows the collapse of a strong, unifying central government. Okay, so it is feudalism. All right, that's the whole point of this video. That's what we need to be thinking of. That's the context of what Western Europe during the Middle Ages is all about, okay? So after the collapse of the Western Empire, the Western Roman Empire, there are a bunch of high-ranking families with a bunch of land that was now effectively theirs and not some faraway emperors way down here in Rome. So for example, a family over here now all of a sudden had control over their land, or in a high-ranking noble family, had control over their land, and not the emperor over here. Okay? Now, certain people, most notably here in France, like Pepin the Short and his son Charlemagne, were able to reassert a part of this authority for a short time. In fact, there he is. There's Charlemagne right there. Karl of West Francia. Were able to reassert some of this authority for a short time. That becomes the Carolingian Empire, but it quickly dissolves, and we're able to see the dissolved empire right here, or kind of the beginnings of the dissolved empire right here. We've got West Francia up here in the dark blue, Middle Francia down here, and then Brittany over here, which is actually the same color as Britain up here, which is where Britain gets its name. But yeah, we've got West Francia, Middle Francia. If we were to go back even further, we could see East Francia over here, but we aren't able to see that at the moment. Sometimes throughout the course of playing this game, East Francia will form, and it's always over here, kind of in Western Germany today. Okay? So, after the dissolution of the Western Roman Empire, local lords began asserting their power more and more on the surrounding lands in order to add to their own personal power and prestige, which is really the point of this whole game, right? I could start a game as Charlemagne right here and go on a massive conquest spree across all of Europe and reform the Carolingian Empire, but it's much more fun to play as, one of these guys right down here, or these super, let's see if we start in Europe. Or if we start over here in Ireland, this is super, right? This is like where all the beginners start. This is where I started. It's super fun to play as like one of these individual lords, and then fight your way up the feudal tree and become king of like an entire area. Like becoming king of all of Ireland, and then becoming, once you're king of all of Ireland, moving over here to becoming king of all of, Britain as well, or the Empire of Britain. So it's much more fun to do it that way, which is kind of how this whole feudal system started in the first place. These local lords asserting their control and asserting their power over the people around them. Okay? When they did this, the increased control they had over the people living there allowed them to press them into service into what are now called fiefs, right? F-I-E-F-S, a fief, which also comes from that same word that gives us the word feudalism. Okay. Once they get powerful enough, they are able to establish new empires, like we'll see later on. And with the increased amount of land these individuals controlled, they needed to delegate the responsibility of daily life further down the feudal ladder so they could focus more on matters of state. For example, this guy right here, who's the king of Lombardy, right here, right? Or Lombardy. I don't know how to pronounce it. If I say it Lombardy, it sounds like I'm talking about a football coach. The king of Lombardy right here, he can't control all of this directly, so he's got these guys right here, known as his vassals, to help him govern most of the Italian peninsula effectively. Same thing over here when I go to the Byzantine Empire. Hey, we've learned about them before, right? We've got all these people right here that help the Byzantine emperor, Basileus Constantinos, it's basically a Greek word for Byzantine emperor, control the territory that is the Byzantine Empire. Remember, this is 769. This is near the tail end of when the Byzantine Empire is really an effective political force. At this point, the Byzantine Empire had reached its height under Justinian and has since started retreating back into Asia Minor and Greece, but we can still see it here. Okay. Yeah, so now that we've kind of gotten that out of the way, let's take a look at how these fiefs and feudalism itself works. All right, so here's a map of the entirety of CK2, right? We see all the way down here from Africa, all the way to India, to China, the Uyghur people up here. We could go get ourselves a perm right here, or we could start all the way up here in Iceland. But we see some familiar faces, don't we? Right? So obviously we see the Byzantine Empire, which you just talked about. But then we also see right here the Abbasid Caliphate that takes over much of the Middle East. And then we can also see the exiled Umayyad up here that retained control of Spain after the Abbasid overthrow them. Okay, if you're an AP, you probably recognize down here, this is Abyssinia, but if I zoom in even further, this is the county of Aksum. This is where the kingdom of Aksum is from, right? Way down here in Ethiopia. Coming over here, we see the Kingdom of Ghana in the Western Sahara, and even here is the Songhai Empire that we have learned about before as well. Okay. Now, if we skip ahead to we see in the early Middle Ages right here, we go to the Viking Age, High Middle Ages. If we skip ahead all the way right here to the late Middle Ages, the map will change. Give it a second. There it is, right? So now the Abbasids are gone. We can see the Yuan dynasty right here in China, right? We can see the Khanate of the Golden Horde. This is a very oversimplified version of the Mongol Empire. Really, the Golden Horde is correct. The Yuan dynasty is correct. The Yuan dynasty would be over here. Right here would be the Il Khanate, right? The Il Khanate in Persia, and then the Chagatai Khanate would be kind of right around here. But, we don't have to worry about that. Okay, Sweden is formed, right? This is after the Viking Age has obviously started. But now we can see a new player has entered the field that we haven't seen before, right? This guy right here. First off, we can see France, a unified France. And now we can see this thing right here, the Holy Roman Empire. So named by the kings that ruled it because it's not holy, it's not Roman, and it's not an empire. Listen, they really wanted people to think they were the natural successor to Rome, so they may have laid the marketing on a little bit thick, so cut them some slack. Right? This, like we said, while it isn't Roman, is more of an evolution of the Hanseatic League, or the Hanseatic League, for all you AP students out there, than anything Roman, and the emperors, rather than being Roman emperors, remember Rome is down here, controlled by the papacy, rather than being Roman, were very thoroughly German. In fact, if I click right there, his title is Kaiser. we'll talk about Kaisers when we talk about World War One and the German and the Kaiserreich. But well, this guy is a Kaiser right here, so he's not Roman in any stretch of the imagination. He's very thoroughly German. Okay, so let's look at the HRE, right? If we go to the Middle Ages, we're in the Middle Ages. Look at the HRE, and specifically this little bit of the HRE, this little kingdom right here known as Bohemia. And we can tell it's this kingdom of Bohemia because if you look at all these dark outlines right here, like this one right here, this tells us where major political divisions exist. And so we can see this dark outline that kind of comes, if you can see my mouse right here, this dark outline coming around all the way down here, across the Elbe River, all the way down, and I'm sorry if it's hard to see because of the pop-up box, but we can still follow the mouse all the way down here, up, down, all around, all the way to right there and back up, right? All of this little area right here is Bohemia, modern-day Czech Republic. Now, because it's white and the rest of the Holy Roman Empire is white, we can see that this area is under the control of the Kaiser, aka the Holy Roman Emperor. But because of the fact that A, the Holy Roman Empire is too large for one person to rule effectively, I mean, come on, let's go back to... We could probably go back to the Third Crusade. That's about when it's at its height. Right? We can... No. It's the High Middle Ages. There it is, right? We can see the Holy Roman Empire does actually cross the Alps and come down here into Italy. So it's a pretty big entity, right? Again, there's the Kaiser again. But if we come all the way down here, and again, here's the Hansa, right? That's where the Hanseatic League gets its name. Come all the way down here to late Middle Ages, it's lost a lot of its prestige, but again, Bohemia is right here. Okay? So because of the fact that it's A, too large for any one person to rule effectively, and B, because the Kingdom of Bohemia was brought into the HRE as a single political unit rather than as individual counties or duchies, Bohemia is actually ruled by a king as well as the Kaiser. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, let's look at the system of feudalism in action. What is it like for the people living under the feudal system? Like we said, feudalism gets its start from these local lords expanding their power. It gets its, it evolves as those local lords turn into kings and emperors of these various different Western European empires and kingdoms throughout the Middle Ages. But this is kind of where this is kind of how life itself boils down to for individual people living under this system. Okay, so we've got the HRE emperor, right? The Holy Roman Emperor right here, the Kaiser, ruling over all of this. But again, he needs to delegate, again, part of this area because it was brought in as a single unit. He needs to delegate this area to the King of Bohemia, right? That's this guy right here, King Johann the Blind. That's him right there. Because the Kaiser doesn't want to deal directly with these people, or he may want to, but it's more effective to let their king do it for him. So if you can think back, if you can pull back to the Persian Empire, you can almost think of this almost like the satrap system, and you wouldn't be very far off. Feudalism is a combination of a lot of these different political institutions that we've learned about so far throughout the year building up to this point. It's a combination of the satrap, it's a combination of the larger hegemonic empire, it's the combination of individual merchant republics, it's a combination of kingdoms, it's a combination of a bunch of stuff that has all led to this point in history. Okay, and so here's the king right here, and you'll notice his kingdom is pretty large. It's basically the entire eastern part of the HRE in the year 1337. It's very elite. And so he, like the emperor, needs to delegate some of this responsibility further down the ladder. Okay, and so he can do that by having two main dukes. Okay, and we've got the Duke Wenzel of Moravia and Duke Boleslav of Silesia. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing... I think Boleslav is the way you pronounce it, and Wenzel is the way you pronounce that, but I have no idea how to pronounce Silesia and Moravia. Whatever. Um, all right, so he needs to delegate this responsibility further down the feudal ladder. Right, so let's click on Wenzel of Moravia. Okay, well, Moravia, because I've played this before and I've done multiple recordings, I know is actually these three little subsections right here. Olomouc, Brno, and Hradec. My Czech is awful. I'm apologizing if you speak Czech at all, or if your family is Czech. So yeah, we've got, these things right here. This makes up the Duchy of Moravia, and a duke is the ruler of a duchy. Crazy how that works, right? Just how a king is the ruler of a kingdom, and the emperor is the ruler of an empire. A duke is the ruler of a duchy. Okay? So yeah, so this is our duchy. This is the duchy right here, and again, it's three of these little different subdivisions, and so again, he can't really govern all of these three effectively, and so he may need to delegate responsibility further down. If again, we go to our vassals right here, we can click on this guy, right? This is Count Mikulas of Olomouc, right? So here's Olomouc. We'll just keep calling it that because why not? Right here. And so this guy, the Count, is the leader of this specific area, and only this specific area. That's what these little lines right here represent. He is the Count of a county. Just like how we have Harris County, right? So, just in case you existed or we were living in the Middle Ages, Harris County or any other county in the United States would be under the rule of a count. Right? And so, like, a lot of times when you hear this stuff, when you hear all these titles, like, if you really get into medieval history in college and you hear all these titles and you're like, man, counts, dukes, duchies, counties, blah, blah, it's like going all over my head. It's very simple if you look at it this way, right? Count rules a county, duke rules a duchy, king, kingdom, emperor, empire, right? It just gets further and further out. Okay, so let's go down to this guy. Okay. And so life for the people under this system is pretty straightforward, okay? They need protection from bandits and marauding, knights and stuff. Maybe Poland will launch like a military expedition down, or Hungary will launch a military expedition up here. So the peasants need protection, and this guy right here, Count Mikulas, has got some extra land lying around, and so he tells the peasants, hey, that you're basically already living here, so what I want you to do is I want you to farm this land, give me a portion of your harvest, and give me a portion of your taxes, and in return, what I'll do is I'll create basically a standing army almost, and I'll be able to protect you from any bandits on the roads or any, military excursions from Hungary or Poland. I'll be able to do all of that for you. And the peasants, they think that's a pretty good idea, and so they settle down to work. Those peasants come to be known as serfs, and they work the land that they're born on, and they typically never leave. There are some exceptions to that. Some serfs will go from town to town, especially if the towns are relatively close together. But for the most part, very simplistic view, the serfs rarely ever really leave the area they're born in, and they continue to work the land that they were born on for their entire lives. Okay, so this duke, he's doing pretty well for himself, or this count, he's doing pretty well for himself, but let's say he gets into trouble. He borders both Hungary and Poland right here, and let's say he gets into a bit of a kerfuffle, we'll call it, with either of these two, and he needs some help. And so what happens is he will appeal to the next highest person above him in the feudal system, which just so happens to be our duke right here, right? And he will be able to offer troops. He will be able to offer, protection from both these two areas right here. Now, in return for that, in exchange for that, this duke is doing the exact same thing to this count that this count is doing to the peasants, right? This duke is coming to this count and saying, hey, listen, you know, you've got this amount of food and this amount of money coming in. I need a percentage of that for my own personal uses. And if you do that, then yeah, sure, I'll give you protection. If you don't, well, sorry, maybe I just conveniently forget to protect you from either one of these kings, or yeah, it's a king, and that's a king too. Maybe I forget to protect you from either one of these kings right here, and so maybe your little county gets taken over by them. Sorry, you should have paid your protection money. All right, so you can think of it almost like a gang. You can think of it. It's better to think of it in terms of this system though. Um, yeah, because I don't like that whole gang comparison. Like, it's good, but not a lot of people watching this are going to be in gangs, so they're not going to think, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Um, so yeah, and so the same thing happens further up the feudal chain, you know, so on and so forth. This guy runs into an issue about, you know, with this little this little duke right here, so he needs protection. So he appeals to the king, right? The king comes in, he fights these guys off. The king runs into issue from the entire kingdom of Poland. He needs help, so he appeals to the emperor, who then sends troops over this way. Okay, and so that's kind of like how it works basically, with money and food being sent further up the chain until you finally get up here. And so we can actually see that if we go down to, where is Johann the Blind? There and there. Let's go ahead and start the game. Oh. Right, there it is. Let's go ahead and start the game right here. We don't need to change any of these rules. We're not going to fiddle too long. And so we're going to, once it loads, it shouldn't take too much longer. Our recording space is almost about to run out too. There it is. Next, close, cool, change it to the realm view. All right, so here's me right here. Here's, you know, my count, right? If I go to my ledger right here, again, I can see domain and that's the stuff I'm making from my personal land and my feudal tax. This is the amount of money right here that I'm getting from this guy, right? You can even see who I'm getting it from, Count Mukulas of Olomouc, right? I'm getting it specifically from him, so he has to pay me taxes for the privilege of having me as his liege. And all liege means is that I'm like it's the next highest person above them in the feudal system, right? So this is my count, I'm his liege, my personal liege is my father, the king, and then his liege is the emperor, right? And so I can see the amount of money I'm taxing this guy. This game really doesn't operate on food, but there's another way that the feudal system works, and that's in the term of troops. So let's say this guy, you know, let's say I wanted to expand my personal power because we wanted to, you know, increase the amount of territory my duchy holds. Fine, whatever. And so I raise my army, and I go off to, that's not intrigue, I raise my army, and I want to go off to fight. I've declared war on somebody, I want to go off to fight. But you'll notice this guy hasn't done this, I haven't raised any troops from here because I don't directly control this area. And so what I can do is I can go to this guy right here, and I can say, hey man, give me your troops, and he's forced to give it to me, right? And so this is what's known as a levy. This is another way how the feudal system like works in terms of its taxation. Not only do you have to provide food and money in the form of taxes to your liege, you also have to provide a certain you also have to provide a certain percentage of your army to your liege whenever he demands it. Right? And then all these guys together, we can combine them, and we can go off and conquer other counties and duchies and kingdoms and so on and so forth. Okay? So that's basically how feudalism works. If you have any questions, please let your history teacher know. They'll be super happy to answer your questions. It's a bit confusing to wrap your head around at first, but hopefully seeing this kind of like, you know, kind of broken down helps some of you guys out. And then if you have any questions, you can always feel free to ask us. Okay? Thank you guys so much, and have a wonderful day.